How's it going? Preston here. Just wanted to talk about some cool stuff going on with the Warlock changes that have been data mined. This is on Wowhead. This is the talent calculator. Obviously, this stuff is way subject to change, and yeah, none of it is final because beta's not even out, right? So obviously, this video is going to be out of date really fast. But I just wanted to talk about some of the cool things that are coming here. So. I'm gonna have demonology up here first, but I want to just touch on the fact that uh, it doesn't really look like demonology in this current form is being touched much. Um, but I'll start with demonology because this is what I talk about most on my channel is demonology. First of all, implosion's not here on the talent tree, but that's possibly just a placeholder because there's this new life tap talent, which is very interesting. So they have this talent for all three warlock specs. Basically, life tap is no longer baseline, which is very interesting. It's definitely a departure from what we've had in the past. And this life tap is a 30-second cooldown with 3 charges. Where you will grant a soul shard at the cost of 15% of your health. Instead of granting mana, you'll be granting soul shards. Now, this is a very interesting change from what we've had before with Life Tap. Life Tap has always been sort of a thing you can do on the move, reliably. Just, hey, get some mana back, you're moving, right? And that's been very nice for us as Warlocks. This talent is interesting. I like it. If it wasn't replacing what we had before, I would be very interested in this talent where you're sacrificing some of your health for some shards. You could sacrifice all 3 for some good burst. I don't think this particular form of life tap would ever be worth for demonology, especially in this tier next to improved Dreadstalkers and impending doom. But we'll have to wait and see what actually happens with demonology. But like I said, there's not much changes going on for the Demonology Warlock so far. If you look here, we don't have our summon Doomguard or Infernal anymore, which is interesting. We'll see what's going on with that. They've also removed Grimoire of Supremacy from all 3 Warlock specs as well. But aside from that, Demonology's not really changed too much. You have a nice, cool, empowered Healthstone talent. This 75 row has been changed for all 3 Warlock specs. So services over here, this synergies over here, they switched that for whatever reason. But I actually want to talk about Affliction and Destruction a bit. So there's not much change going on here, but I'll just hover over these and you can pause at any time you want if you want to read the tooltips, or I'll also have links to this stuff if you want to check it out for yourself. But yeah, this is mostly the same. There's that new life tap. Same. Demon Skin, Rain Rush, Dark Pact, Soul Harvest, Hand of Doom, Power Trip. Now, Empowered Healthstone is very interesting. The way it works is, so if we look at basic Healthstone, it says it's healing 40% of our health, which is insane. And then this is Empowered Healthstone, which is a talent where Healthstones will heal you for an additional 30% of your maximum health over 6 seconds. Now, basically, this is kind of like live Affliction Warlock, the amount of healing you're going to get out of your Healthstones. Now, in Battle for Azeroth, we're not going to have that trait as Affliction anymore, which is very, so it's cool to see that we're still going to kind of have that as an option versus Mortal Coil or Demonic Circle. I think most of the time people are going to be picking Empowered Healthstone over Demonic Circle, as Demonic Circle is very useful in certain situations, but in most of the time it's very situational. I personally love Demonic Circle. I'm glad they're not getting rid of it. There's always the fear with the new expansion they're going to get rid of it. Personally, I'm really glad they're getting rid of Supremacy. It was a really cool in concept, but in execution, it just wasn't that great. It was really, the Doomguard, while it looked really, really cool, was essentially just a really big imp that had an interrupt. It didn't really interplay with anything you did, so it was kind of neat. I'm gonna be sad to miss the Permanent Infernal though, because it had some really nice abilities, like the ability to purge targets, the ability to be kind of a second tank for a bit, and the AoE stun was very nice. Now, one thing I will mention is you might be freaking out right now not seeing Shadow Fury as a talent. That's okay, don't freak out. They're making Shadow Fury baseline for all 3 Warlock specs, which is a very welcome change in my book, because Shadow Fury is a very good utility for Mythic Plus, and just in general. And so to see it become baseline is a welcome addition. So synergy is nice. It has this approximate proc here. I don't know how accurate that is. And service is here as well. So Soul Conduit is a 15%. That's fine. Dark Glaire's here. We'll have to see how that plays out. Always thought Dark Glare was cool, but it's never really worth. Demon Bolt is still just a replacement of Shadow Bolt. Like I said, though, Demonology is very likely to change. They've said they're going to change it a lot, so I'll be keeping a close eye. Excuse me. I'll be keeping a very close eye as to what's going on with that. Now, I want to talk about. We'll come back to Destruction. I want to talk about Affliction. So, in the current live game, I personally find Affliction to be somewhat boring. It can be really cool in certain fights and scenarios, and I like its ability to control and take advantage of procs via the stacking of damage over times and its reap mechanic. Now, we're going to be losing the reap mechanic come Battle for Azeroth. Now, what is going to replace that, right? A lot of what Affliction plays around right now is its artifact weapon. It is probably, I would say, one of the most dependent classes on their artifact mechanics out of all the classes. And losing it's going to be very interesting. So, what are we getting instead of that? Now, first of all, we're going back to a very... an older playstyle for Affliction. A playstyle for Affliction we really haven't seen since Cataclysm, which I'm very happy about, but we'll see how the rest of the community reacts to this, because it seems that sometimes the Warlock community can be pretty outcry. So we'll see how it plays out. But from what I'm seeing here, I'm very happy. Now, looking at our spec-specific abilities, they will be getting Shadow Bolt. You will be using Shadow Bolt as your filler. This is further confirmed by there are talents that improve Shadow Bolt and everything. So we're not going to be using Drain Soul as our filler anymore. We're going to be using Shadow Bolt as our filler. Personally, I like that a lot more. It makes us not feel like another kind of Shadow Priest. It makes us feel a little bit different. And yeah, Shadows Bolts from the Shadow spec. Like, let's go. So, we're still able to stack our unstable afflictions, and we're still able to do all of that. I'm a little disappointed that it looks like they're still going to be forcing us into a particular pet. I've never been a fan of that. I've always wanted to be able to use my pets based on their utility and not based on any form of, like, one's better DPS. Now, let's get into the damaging abilities, or the talents, I should say. So, over here we have Shadow's Embrace, or Shadow Embrace. Some veteran players may recognize this mechanic. Shadow Bolt applies Shadow Embrace, increasing your damage delta at target by 3% for 10 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. So it'll be about 9. It'll probably round it up to 10% damage. So that's just kind of a nice passive. We'll see how that plays out. I personally think it's interesting, but it's not like super amazing, right? It's okay. Something I wanted to mention about Unstable Affliction is Contagion is built into its effect now. You can see you do 10% increased damage to targets affected by your Unstable Affliction. This is baseline, so don't freak out that talent is gone. So with the removal of Drain Soul, we are also removing a Malefic Grasp. That playstyle is sort of gone. Not completely. I'll say why in a second. But what they're replacing with is very interesting to me. So you can still have up to 5 unstable afflictions on the target at once, and you still have the contagion effect. Haunt looks pretty much unchanged. This is, 10% damage for 12 seconds. Now, what's interesting about this is it does its damage, which we'll have to see how hard it hits. It has a 10-second cooldown, and the debuff from Haunt lasts for 12 seconds. So, what's interesting about that is it actually lasts longer than its cooldown, so you could have this at 100% uptime on a boss fight without having to rely on resetting its cooldown via adds. So that's very nice. It makes it a little bit more of a versatile spell, as opposed to a very niche one. So that's nice. So, but this is the one I find the most interesting here. So this is a new ability called Deathbolt. First of all, I want to see how that looks when we cast it. The icon's very, very cool. So anyway, this has a 2-second cast, a 25-second cooldown. It launches a bolt of death at the target, dealing 15% of the total remaining damage of your damage over time effects on the target. So this is very interesting because it can be used a few different ways. So number one, it helps affliction on little adds that die quickly, so that you can get some quick damage out there. You can use it right after refreshing Agony, so Agony's at full stacks with like a full duration effect. It's going to do 15% of that total Agony damage, which is very cool. But more obviously, I just see here it says counts as up to 16 seconds of your corruption damage, and I think that's because absolute corruption is still a thing, so it doesn't want to. You don't want to get too confused with that. So anyway, what this means though is that you could stack a bunch of UAs on the target and then hit a death bolt for some really nice burst damage. This plays into the fact that if you have a trinket proc or something like that, like if we have something like Concordance of the Legion Fall going forward, I know we won't be having Concordance, thank God, but if we have a trinket proc that gives us a massive intellect buff or a crit buff or something like that, we can cast our death bolt at the target with a few UAs on there and really take advantage of that. So I really like that. It's going to be really fun to play around with. We'll have to see how viable it is, but I'm really looking forward to how that plays. Like I said, Affliction is also getting this new life tap with the 3 charges that generate a soul shard at 15% cost of your max health, with the 3 charges and all that. They're putting Absolute Corruption and Writhe and Agony in the same talent tier. Personally, I think this is a bit odd. I don't hate it inherently because it just kind of means that Absolute Corruption will become sort of this AoE talent more than Writhe and Agony, because Writhe and Agony, I feel, is going to be the 2 to 3 target cleave talent over Absolute Corruption when they're faced off in the same tier. Now, looking at this, I don't think anyone's really going to pick Life Tap over Writhe and Agony or Absolute Corruption, except maybe in Mythic Plus or something like that. But Mythic Plus will become a lot more viable in Battle for Azeroth as a gameplay type. So we'll see what happens here. So this talent rose is much the same. It's 45 instead of 75. Otherwise, it's unchanged. This is mostly unchanged. Phantom Singularity, they're increasing the range of it to 15 yards up from 8 yards, which is pretty nice. And it's still the same. I think Phantom Singularity has been a pretty neat talent. Overall, it's just not seen a ton of use. Soul Harvest is still pretty much Soul Harvest. It's okay. So the Seeds, they're knocking it down to 1 extra target for Seed of Corruption. So I don't know if that means they're buffing the base damage of Seed of Corruption. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out. I'm a little bit disappointed in that. Actually, hang on, does Seed of Corruption still... Yeah, Seed of Corruption still casts a Soul Shard. It says 10 Soul Shards there, but that's just because it's technically 10 soul shard fragments, because a Destro uses fragments, which means each soul shard is technically 10 fragments. It's just a bug with the tooltip. So yeah, that's that talent tree. This is still the same as the other one I talked about with Demonology. So this is a very welcome change. Grimoire Sacrifice. So, sacrifice your demon, gaining its power, its command demon ability, and 15% increased damage done. So, this is how it should have been. This is how it's been in the past. Since Mists of Pandaria and into Warlords of Draenor, we had the ability to sacrifice our pet and gain one of its utility spells, and then just a flat damage buff. We're returning to that because sometimes in Mythic Plus you can't, your pet becomes more trouble than he's worth, right? So you want to take this thing, and you can get a nice utility out of it. So you can sacrifice your your Fel Hunter, and get the Silence, or you can sacrifice your Imp and get the Dispel, and then you can help out your party that way. So you can have an extra Dispel, or you can have an extra Interrupt, or you can have an extra CC, or something like that. I've always thought that the utility that comes with the Warlock's pets is something that was really underutilized in Legion, and I'm very glad to see the return of Grimoire Sacrifice back to what it should be. So what's next to that? Anyway, we have Death's Embrace. So this works pretty much the same as it does on Live, but it's on a different tier now, where you will progressively do more and more increased damage to lower and lower health targets, starting at 35% and going up in damage up until 50%. So that's going to affect your Agony, Corruption, Unstable Affliction, and Shadow Bolt. Now, Nightfall! Woo! Hype, right? Old school. Corruption has a chance to make your next Shadow Bolt instant cast and do extra damage. This, it sounds cool, but considering that we're really going to be spamming Shadow Bolt as our filler, it's kind of like procs to me. I like the Lava Surge proc from Elemental Shaman, where you're casting one spell and it's like, oh shit, I'm going to hit this button. This is kind of like, I'm hitting the button, and I'm still hitting the same button, but that time it hit instant and it was cooler. We'll go kind of see how that plays out. Because we're not going to be using Drain Soul anymore. Drain Soul has been removed. Drain Life is still here, but it doesn't look like it's going to be our go-to spell. But we never know. They could be moving into that direction. We'll just have to wait and see. Siphon Life is still here. I'm happy about that. Now, this is a new ability, Creeping Death. So, if you hate the RNG from Soul Conduit, and you don't like the extra button from Siphon Life, we have Creeping Death. Creeping Death means that your Agony, Corruption, Unstable Affliction deal their full damage 15% faster. This means you are going to have to refresh a lot more, but it means that they're going to hit faster. So this could be really good for Mythic Plus, because a lot of the times, mobs aren't going to last long enough to take the full damage from your dots. And it also means, honestly, it's pretty much a flat 15% increase. It's not quite a 15% increase. It's more like probably closer to like a 12 to 14% increase in damage, because you're spending more global cooldowns, increasing that damage. But that's okay. Alright, so let's look at Destruction. Alright. Destruction. Now, there's a lot of unknowns here. So like I said, Grimoire of Service, Supremacy, not there. Going to be replaced by something else. We'll see. Now, Destruction still has Summon Infernal, which is very interesting. We'll see how it plays out. One thing I'll note with this is it looks like it is going to play pretty much the same as it does on Live, except for one very interesting difference, and that interesting difference is that Infernal will passively generate you Soul Shard fragments every half a second, which is very neat. So it'll keep generating you fragments. Now, I don't know if this means that it's AoE damage, will generate you fragments, meaning that in an AoE scenario, you'll be getting a ton of fragments versus a single target fight where you'll only be getting a little bit, or if it's just a flat one fragment every half second. We'll have to see. Other than that, Rain of Fire has been changed to no longer. Oh no, it does still cast Soul Shards. Okay, no, I misread that, so that is still the same. But other than that, it's mostly the same. I don't know if we're still gonna have Shadow Bolt. This could just be a mistype, but it would be nice to still have it as an option in case we get fire locked. We can still cast something, but there doesn't seem to be any talents that improve Shadow Bolt in any way, so I would assume we're still using Incinerate. Now, Eradication, Backdraft, and Soulfire. Ooh, the return of Soulfire. Hype. Now, Eradication. This is still pretty much the same as it is on live. Chaos Bolt increases damage you deal to that target by 15% for 7 seconds. This allows you to weave in a Chaos Bolt with a couple quick Incinerate casts or Channel Demon Fire, which is still a thing. And then have those Chain Chaos Bolts that hit hard back to back, which I've been a fan of. So, Backdraft, this seems to be baseline, and it's still a talent. Yep, it's still a talent. Now, Soulfire, the return of Soulfire. Now, this is interesting that they're bringing it back. It looks like, okay, so 2 times 140% spell power. That is more damage than Chaos Bolt. So it is going to hit harder than a Chaos Bolt. It has a 45-second cooldown, a 4-second base cast time. Now, this costs, quote, 10 Soul Shards, which means 1 Soul Shard. Chaos Bolt costs 20, which is 2. So this is going to cost 1 Soul Shard instead of 2. And it has a longer cast time, and it basically just hits really hard and has a 45-second cooldown. I don't like how this is implemented. I'd like to see Soulfire return. Personally, I'd like to see Soulfire return for Demonology because I think the Molt Core mechanic should make a return, and the Decimation mechanic should make a return for Demonology. This version of Soulfire, I'm excited that it's back, and I want to see Soulfire as being cast again. But this particular incarnation of it, I'm not super pleased with. Like they need to do a little bit more with it, in my opinion. Like maybe Soulfire buffs your damage by 10% for X amount of seconds. Kind of bring that old Cataclysm Soulfire mechanic that we had back then back. Could be interesting. Even though personally at the time I hated it, but we'll see how Soulfire plays out. So Life Tap. If this is the case, Life Tap is going to be very valuable for destruction because if it gives you a full Soul Shard at the cost of 15% of your life, there's no way you're ever going to take the whatever this other talent could be, could compete with it, but it'll mean that Life Tap will be very strong for destruction, because you could store up a ton of Sards, wait for your God procs, sink them all in, Life Tap 3 times, sink a couple more in, right? So that could be very cool. Shadowburn is changing yet again. This is yet another incarnation of Shadowburn. I don't know why they're not happy with Shadowburn. Why they're never happy, I should say. It was great in MOP/Warlords. Like, that was a good Shadowburn we had where it was just an execute spell similar to Shadow Word Death. I'd like to see that return. They do not, for whatever reason. But this is a bit different. I like this better than the current version. The current version replaces your Conflagrate, which I'm not a fan of at all. But this one, it is its own separate spell. Thank God. It has 2 charges, which is interesting. 12-second recharge, and other than that, it pretty much works the same way where it generates some fragments, and then if they die, you get some more fragments. But what's interesting about this is if they die within that 5-second window, the cooldown is reset. This will be very nice for leveling at the very least, and possibly for dungeons as well. And we don't know what is going to be in the tier next to it. We don't know. It could be something really cool. It could be something really dumb. But judging by what's in this row, it could be some sort of passive shard generation talent. We'll have to see. Possibly, a lot of the classes have been taking things from our artifact weapons and making them talents or just straight baseline. Perhaps we would see something like Dimensional Rift in this talent row. I think that could be pretty fitting. Um, but we'll have to see what happens. Fire and Brimstone is still the same as it is on live. Cataclysm as well, and Soul Harvest. These are all the same as they are on live. But yeah, personally, I'd like to see Fire and Brimstone return to the way it was, where it could affect more spells than just Incinerate, and you had the ability to control it, which is very good, especially on certain keys where you need to not kill all the mobs at the same time. Yeah. Anyway, these are still very much the same. Sacrifice is still much the same as when I covered it over on Affliction. Grimoire of Synergy. This is the same as on Demonology currently, which is very interesting. So we'll have to see how that plays out, and we'll have to see what they replace here. Soul Conduit is still Soul Conduit, and Channel Demon Fire looks pretty much unchanged. So the most notable things here are going to be Soul Fire's return, obviously Life Tap, the new Shadowburn, and we'll see what happens with these. One thing I'll touch on is, yes, Wreak Havoc is gone, and it looks like Havoc has become what you had with Wreak Havoc, where it's a 25-second cooldown with 10-second duration, which is just how it should have been anyway. So that's very nice to see. Infernal is going to be pretty much exclusive to Destruction, at least from what we're seeing right now. We'll have to see. Once again, like I said, we're going to have to see what happens with Demonology. I have high hopes, but I'm not holding my breath. We'll see what happens. I'd like to see Doomguard maybe be a Demonology only thing. I think that could be pretty neat. Maybe summon a bunch of Doomguards, right? That'd be really cool. There's a lot of cool stuff they could do with Demonology where we just don't know, and we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But yeah, anyway, I hope this has been a pretty good video for you. I don't think there's anything else really to cover. We are not getting now. A lot of classes are getting their buffs back for the raid. Like Warlocks used to have Dark Intent, right? We're not getting Dark Intent back. That's not something that's happening. So unfortunately, that's not going to be happening. But we are still having a lot of our utility returned with our pets. So destruction does not seem to have, like in the artifact, we had your imp does extra damage to things with your immolate on the target, right? It was like 50% extra damage, and it's like you can't not use your imp because your party needs an extra interrupt, but you can't use your fell hunter because you're going to lose a ton of damage. It's going to be DPS loss. That's never a good situation. You want to be able to switch your pet, and it looks like destruction is going to be able to do that, so I'm happy about that. Although, like I said, I am disappointed that Affliction is going to have the Shadow Bite mechanic, which pretty much forces them into Fell Hunter. We'll have to wait and see with Demonology, but like I said, you guys have been really great, and I'll keep you guys posted on any Warlock changes that come out. This is a bit, like I said, this is an unscripted video, so just pretty much my raw reactions and sort of my raw take on things. Let me know what you guys think, and later.